In this week's EV news, NIO slash prices amid a Tesla-spurred price war. The UK is warned against an over-reliance on Chinese supplied batteries for EVs. Ford opens a new high-tech EV production centre as it looks to increase its market share of electric cars. Surrey County Council launch a new Kerbside EV charging trial. And UK technology for EV battery repair is set for a major European launch. It has been a while since we've done an EV news, but as you've probably noticed, things on the channel are starting to get back to normal. And this week, I need your help. I am looking to launch this series of videos, the EV news stuff, as a podcast in order to try and increase the reach. Some people have suggested before that given the nature of the content, they'd actually rather listen to it than watch it. So I thought, why not give you the choice? But every podcast needs a name, and that's where you come in. So what I'd like you to do in the comments, suggest a name for an EV news podcast. Basically these videos, but in podcast form. Now, I could just ask ChatGPT to do it for me and get a big list of suggested names and pick one, but I thought, let's have a bit of audience participation, shall we? So let me know your suggestions in the comments. The cheesier the better, and I will pick one of them to be the new face of EV news. Nothing's going to change for those of you that like watching this in video form. It's going to be very, very similar. It'll just also be available on other platforms, or at least that's the plan. Might take me a few weeks to get it off the ground, but the name is the first step. So get yourself in the comments and give me your suggestions. For those of you that are new here, make sure you click that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future episodes. And for those returning viewers, make sure you click like to convince the algorithm that these videos are worth watching. Keep an eye out for more news and other videos coming up. I'm trying really hard to get back to a regular upload schedule and we're making pretty good progress so far. Let's get right into it then with NIO's news of price cuts. Tesla cutting prices early in the year caused quite the stir, and it seems that other manufacturers are also clambering into action. NIO, that Chinese manufacturer that you've probably heard of mostly due to their battery swapping initiative, are next to throw their hat in the ring and start to slash prices to respond to Tesla. They're cutting prices by 30,000 yuan, that's $4,200 US, or just under £3,300, across every model they sell, which is a 6% to 9% price cut roughly across their range, which seems quite hefty, doesn't it? But some would say that a lot of EVs are overpriced and manufacturers are actually just reining in their profit margin a little bit in order to stay competitive. It's not all good news for NIO customers though. Up until now, battery swapping has been completely free of charge and you could perform up to 4 battery swaps every month. But for new customers, that's going to become a chargeable service. I don't have any information on what the costs are going to be involved with that, but it does make you wonder if battery swapping is quite as promising as people have made it out to be. Battery swapping, of course, is hailed by some as the complete answer to the charging problem. Why would you wait for a car to charge if you can just quickly swap out the battery? But if the economics don't quite stand up and even NIO themselves are reducing how appealing that offering is, it makes you wonder if those that say, well, actually charging is the way forward and swapping isn't going to work, might be onto something. But the price cuts are, of course, the main story here. Do we think the EV market's got more of this to come? I think there's been some predictions for quite a while now that EVs are broadly overpriced and that we'll see progressive price cuts, especially as batteries get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, that mean that entry price should start coming down. People have long accused manufacturers of blatant profiteering on their EV ranges. But I'm not sure price cuts are going to do it alone. I'm not sure you can just slash the price of every model. I think what we actually need to see are simpler models with less stuff thrown in, less powerful motors, and that's probably how we'll start to see the models appear that will really break the price barriers, is that they'll be a bit simpler. And let's be honest, with internal combustion cars, that was always the way as well. You could buy a Dacia, fairly simple, using slightly older tech from the Renault stable that they come out of, and as a result, this simple range of still decent but slightly older technology cars was at a really cheap price point, at least to start with. I know they're still competitive now, but prices are definitely creeping up. But we need someone to do that for EVs. We need a Dacia of the EV world that's going to come in with simple, cheap models that are going to captivate large amounts of the EV buying audience. And I do wonder who's going to do that. I suspect one of the Chinese manufacturers is going to step in and do that. Maybe not NIO, who seem to pitch themselves at the premium end of the market, however. But one thing's for sure, Tesla are continuing to shake up the market, and the effect that the price cuts have on other manufacturers is a really curious one. I'm not sure manufacturers can compete with Tesla on price alone. And I'm actually really surprised what we haven't seen is for those, especially that are involved in like charging consortiums like Ionity, that we haven't seen them up their efforts to roll out more and more chargers and compete with Tesla in the charging space as well. How often do you hear someone say, oh, if you want an EV to do long distance, you need a Tesla? Well, none of the manufacturers seem to be willing to step up and go after that. And I think just trying to compete on price isn't going to be the way. Next up, Britain must avoid becoming overly reliant on Chinese battery technology for EVs, said Business Secretary Kemi Badenoch. The warning has come as the government is involved in finalising an expected deal between China's Envision and Jaguar Land Rover owner Tata Motors to build the UK's second significant battery factory for EVs in Somerset. The deal is expected to finalise within weeks, would provide a big boost to the UK car industry, which is struggling to attract investments from battery makers. But it would leave the sector heavily reliant on Envision, who already have a plant in Sunderland that supplies batteries to Nissan. Badenoch said that Envision were welcome to invest in the UK, saying that we have encouraged them to come here. But she conceded that the UK had to make sure that we're not overly reliant on one country for battery technology. What the pandemic showed us was that being overly reliant on any specific country, whether it's China or somewhere else, is terrible for having strengthened supply chains, she added. Chinese battery manufacturers dominate the European motor industry, with more factories than from any other nation, including South Korea and Japan. Now, I'm sure this one is going to be very, very controversial in the comments. Anytime we mention China and the Chinese EV industry, whether that be car manufacturers, battery manufacturers, it gets people really riled up. So, let me know what you think in the comments. Are we right to be cautious that as a nation we could be becoming too reliant on China or any other single nation when it comes to such a vital component for EV manufacturing? I certainly think seeing more competition from other nations in this space could be a good thing. And I'm sure you'll have some very strong opinions, so do let me know what you think. Next up, Ford announced it is to open a new EV production facility in Germany as it steps up its preparations for an all-electric future. The Cologne Electric Vehicle Centre will build Ford's next generation of EVs as the brand looks to move away from petrol power. The site opens following €2 billion of investment to refurbish and repurpose the 93-year-old facility. This facility is Ford's first carbon-neutral assembly plant, as Ford aimed to achieve carbon neutrality across its European operations. That includes facilities, logistics and suppliers by 2035. Bill Ford, Executive Chair, said opening the Cologne EV Centre is the start of a new generation of clean manufacturing and electric vehicles in Europe. This facility will now be one of the most efficient and environmentally responsible plants in the entire industry. I am thrilled to continue working towards a zero emissions future for our children and grandchildren. Ford hoped that this transformation will allow the Cologne facility to continue producing iconic vehicles after it was previously used to build the likes of the Model A, the Capri and the Ford Granada. And what it shows, I think, is a massive drive from Ford for investment in manufacturing EVs. They're yet another car maker that seem to be going hard with electric and going a long way to prove that indeed it is the future, at least for their passenger cars. Now it's time for Used Bargain of the Week. And what's caught my eye on AutoTrader this week? Well, it has to be this sub £12,000 Seat Me, the Seat version of the VW Up. It's only 2 years old, it's got less than 19,000 miles on the clock, and at less than £12,000, I would say it's an absolute bargain, wouldn't you? It's a capable little thing. Yes, it's just a city car, but it can rapid charge and it would deliver what the majority of people would use a car this size for anyway. People aren't, on the whole, travelling the length and breadth of the country in cars like this. There was a number of cheap lease deals on these in 2020 and 2021, and I'm guessing they're coming to an end now, and that's why we're seeing them appear on the market quite cheaply. But let me know what you think in the comments. Is a sub 12 grand Seat Me tempting for you? It certainly would be for me if I was looking for a little car of that kind of spec. I mean, Even if I was looking for a petrol one, I'd be seriously tempted to go electric at this kind of money for a car that's basically brand new, hardly been used. I think that's absolutely astonishing value for money, and it's yet more sign that the EV used market really is now ramping up to become really competitive. And the days of, oh, they're far too expensive, I only ever buy second-hand cars anyway, so I can't afford a brand new car. Well, some of these used cars that are appearing might well be right up your street. Back to the news, and charging news next, as another council decides to get on the Kerbside charging action. Surrey County Council are the latest to announce a trial for domestic curbside charging. That's for those that don't have off-street parking, live in terraced houses, that kind of thing. And they're hailing this trial as one of the first in the UK in their press release. But I'm not sure when we stop calling things one of the first. How many does there need to be before this isn't one of the first? Because there have been quite a few councils now run these kind of trials. So yeah, I think you're a bit behind the times on that, sorry, but okay. Two options are being offered. A cable gully, which needs no explanation really, and I think should be the de facto standard for this kind of thing. Cable gully, nice and cheap, you can run your own cable through it, you can charge your car, perfect. But they're also testing a Trojan AON charger. Now what's a Trojan AON charger, I hear you ask? Well, I had the same question, so I had to look it up as well. It is a pavement-mounted charging point that connects to your home energy supply. So it's using the domestic rated energy rather than commercial with the 20% VAT and all that stuff. But you can also share it between other residents that also have one. Now, this seems a little bit bonkers to me. As I say, I'm a fan of the cable gully. I think they're the cheap and simple solution. But what this does is answer that age-old question of, well, what if I can't park outside my house? Well, it would seem you just park outside someone else's that has the same kind of charging setup. You plug in, you use your account to pay for the charging, and therefore you can share these chargers amongst different households. And that sounds really interesting. I think if you got to the situation where most houses in the street had one of these, and then it didn't really matter who parked where, that sounds really cool. Not so good if there's like a couple of you have one, and then you've got to fight each other for the spaces, but everybody else might also be at the part there. That's where it gets a bit complex, I think. But it sounds very interesting, and I'll be keeping an eye out on any results from this trial. They are deploying 30 cable gullies and 50 Trojan chargers as part of the trial. And that's it for this week's EV news. Let me know what you think about any of these stories in the comments, and because your views are always appreciated, and you've always got some quite interesting views, especially in some of the more controversial stories. Make sure you also get yourself in the comments and tell me what you think a podcast version of these videos should be called. There will be more news next week, so make sure you have subscribed with notifications turned on. But for now, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.